This is episode 255 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Wally, another busy week here in New Mexico politics and public policy. And without any further ado, the number one issue on everybody's minds is Governor Lujan Grisham heading to Washington, D.C. to work for the Biden administration. And we finally got a definitive answer on that. Looks like there is a big no there.
She will be staying here to work on COVID and get New Mexico back in the game. It was a weird one. So a weird kind of story about how it happened, at least as the news media is portraying it. It's one of those, never doubt the news media, heaven forbid, but it is a strange story about how this maybe all unfolded.
Well, the story we have been given is that the governor was offered position as Secretary of the Interior. In that case, she would have been charged with managing the considerable federal estate of the United States. So, lands owned here in New Mexico, which about 40 or so percent of New Mexico is managed by the federal government. Not all of that would be under the Interior Department. Military reservations, White Sands would not have been. But as far as I know, all native lands as well as BLM and Forest Service all would have been under her purview here in New Mexico. So a sizable quantity of land and real important issues for New Mexico, resources available on those lands would have been under her control. Apparently, she turned the Biden administration down. It does not appear that she was given or ever offered the slot at HHS, which Health and Human Services. Definitely more of her perceived bailiwick, whether she's
she's any good at it or not, she certainly has a huge interest in that.
Right.
And that was the rumor for months and months and months leading up to this announcement that she got, so all you ever heard was Health and Human Services, Health and Human Services. And then at the 11th hour, Interior Department. Very strange.
Yeah. And I think it is easy to see that she is not as passionate or as interested in interior as a position. The thing that looking at this from the Biden administration, they have been very adamant from the very early days of this campaign. He picked his vice president, Kamala Harris, long after telegraphing that it was going to be, I believe, an African-American female. Now, Kamala Harris's exact ethnicity is not going to be discussed in this podcast, but the fact is he essentially said from day one, this is going to be a very, quote, diverse group that he's going to put together in terms of his cabinet officials and his administration. Of course, Governor Lujan Grisham checks 2 boxes, maybe 3, depending on how you look at it. Female, Hispanic, and vertically challenged.
Okay, there you go.
So she gets the short person vote, but it doesn't look like she will be heading off to Washington, D.C. for the Biden administration. Javier Becerra, a long-serving congressman out of California. He is the I believe it's not official, maybe, but he is the individual that has been chosen to head up HHS instead. Definitely, Wally, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but I do think that given kind of the benefits ethnically, demographically, being a governor, being a congresswoman, there must have been some red flags there, honestly, not just based on our low standing that we hold the governor in, but clearly she's the very type of person that the Biden administration has been looking for, looking at. Uh, it's interesting to see that she was not chosen. I think it's very surprising, quite honestly.
Yeah, I was very surprised. And then, the story is that somehow offering her the interior position was like this loyalty test, which now it starts to sound a little bit like a mafia movie. It's like your loyalty needs to be proven before we decide what we're going to do with you. But in any event, she's not going to be going to Washington. She's going to stay right here in New Mexico, and but she does continue a relatively what shall we say? Every politician has aspirations for the next level. It's a little bit like, Bull Durham. They want to go to the show. It seems like the show is in Washington, and they don't necessarily like hanging out here in New Mexico. We saw with Bill Richardson. The thing he liked most about being governor of New Mexico is the opportunity to maybe get to do something different. I'm not sure I quite got that feeling with her, but boy, there was a lot of attention paid to that issue that I'm not sure helped anyone. It certainly didn't help New Mexico, and it looked like at the end of the day, it might have not have helped the governor as well politically.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that in just a second, but I apologize. Not that I'm wrong in stating this, but Becerra was in Washington, D.C. during part of the time I was there, so I associate him mostly with being a congressman from California. He was most recently the Attorney General of California, having served in that role since 2017, but he was in Congress for quite a while from 93 to 2017. So long serving member of Congress, as well as now Attorney General of California. Uh, in terms of the governor, on one hand, I look at it and say, she will never, and few will ever have the kind of power over the population of her state, in this case, 2 million plus souls in New Mexico, uh, that she will have in Washington, D.C., unless she is President of the United States or perhaps Secretary of Defense, which I don't expect. That's not something that she's ever really been engaged in. She, as HHS Secretary, name the current HHS Secretary under Trump. Uh, I couldn't do it. And most often, these kinds of folks, while prominent in Washington, D.C., powerful in their own right, honestly, most Americans go about their daily lives and they don't give two thoughts about who the Secretary of Health and Human Services is.
Yeah, the way I convey that idea is name your top five health and human services cabinet secretaries in the history of the United States of America. Most people would struggle to name one. Uh, Two would be pretty good, and anything beyond that shows that you are a political animal, that you know your bureaucrats and bureaucracy. So,
Yeah, I would know Sebelius partially, mostly because her name was Jane Sebelius, former, I believe, governor of Kansas. Her name is attached to a lawsuit relating to the law known as Obamacare. And then there was another individual who served as HHS secretary who also was on a lawsuit relating to Obamacare and whose name escapes me now. Uh, let's see.
you almost.
Burwell. Yeah, that was another Obamacare lawsuit. The gentleman's name these days is Alex Azar. And
Yeah, and in the midst of COVID-19 and coronavirus, I have not. That's a name I have not heard. I've not seen him quoted. It's one of those. We both know. We all know about the Dr. Fauci, and he gets a lot of airtime. There's other federal officials, but not the cabinet secretary. So, and then the other thought that I had, Paul, and I do think that this is one. Yeah, a governor a governor is a powerful political position. That is a powerful bureaucratic position. I'm not sure, why you would ever want that, but she did, but she's not going to get it. And we'll see what happens from there. There tend to be some turnover in cabinet positions, so it doesn't mean never. There could come a time here, 6 months, a year, two, and beyond. And if there's a second term, maybe that still is a possibility, but not for now.
And on the interior position, which is a powerful role, uh, Deb Haaland, Congresswoman from here in the Albuquerque area, has been mentioned. No selection has come about yet, at least no public name has been put forth as Interior Secretary. And this would be a very important position, especially with Biden having campaigned and talked very, very publicly about banning fracking on federal lands. Uh, Deb Haaland has also stated that that is her position. It would be interesting because, uh, on one hand, Lujan Grisham is actually probably to the right of Biden on energy issues, uh, including fracking on federal lands. Deb Haaland is much more, to the left of Lujan Grisham on energy. I know it's a little bit nuanced here, but definitely, folks, Deb Haaland is very far to the left in ways that Lujan Grisham maybe is not, and she would be I think, much more problematic Interior Secretary would Deb Haaland. So we shall see. I have no doubt that we'll get lots more information. Of course, uh, Martin Heinrich and Tom Udall are both at least floated for Interior Secretary, but they suffer from white male itis, and that is definitely going to be a challenge for any Biden secretarial post. Not that they wouldn't necessarily pick folks like that, but uh, it's not the way they're trending. So we are stuck with Lujan Grisham, at least apparently, for the time being. That means that she has another 2 years left as governor until she has to stand for the voters and either be reelected or be booted out. And um, who knows what issues will be most prevalent by then. Hopefully, COVID-19 is kind of a distant memory at that point, but that would probably be a boon for her politically if it is, because I guess Biden hasn't been super excited in the way she managed the crisis, or at least the numbers look. And I suspect that may be the real issue, is that she's following the playbook but not getting the results. Whereas Becerra is just a attorney general. He's making decisions, but he is not Gavin Newsom. He doesn't have kind of the buck stops here sort of approach where with California's COVID numbers. Whereas this governor has kind of put her credibility on the line, so to speak, in terms of her approach to COVID-19.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Yeah, and Becerra, being an attorney general, he's as you say, he's been to Washington, but not a whole lot to do on the direct
Mm-hmm.
COVID policy or even implementation of that. I would have no doubt that I'm sure that he's had to go after somebody or do something from a legal point of view, but again, not his policy, not his results. And in the case of New Mexico, it's one of those things we've seen around the country. There have been very, what shall we say, laid back and very passive approaches to dealing with COVID. We've seen very, very hands on approaches, and New Mexico certainly falls into that category. And when you have the hands on approach like we've had here, it's one of those things that's it's like the breakable item in the gift store. You break it, you break it, you bought it. And so our governor has bought it for one way or another, for better or for worse, because she has taken such a strong approach. And yet, yeah, our results are not as good as many, and a lot worse than a lot of states out there that have had way better economies and had a better time of in the time of COVID-19.
And the upshot for us here in New Mexico is that we now have a revised set of rules. We're out of, I suppose, the most draconian recent lockdown in terms of the 2 week shutdown or reset. The governor has unveiled a new and not necessarily improved red, yellow, green approach on a county by county basis, where you have counties, and right now I'm not sure on the exact numbers, but virtually all counties are in the red level. They
Yeah,
will,
there's maybe one. I think San Miguel right now is yellow, but
right. Yeah, San Miguel being home to Las Vegas, New Mexico. So
the historic one, not the fun
yeah, for
one.
fun and games, go to Las Vegas. Just kidding, because red is extremely strict. And on my way over here, Wally, I did drive by. You live kind of to get to the Drangmeister house from where I come from. There are a number of uh, big box stores.
With people outside, I suspect.
Yes,
What did you
yes.
see? Because I was out yesterday, Paul, at many of those big box stores near my house looking for an item. And man, there were lines in all of them, in some very big. The Walmart in particular,
Yeah.
it looked like waiting to get Grateful Dead tickets in San Francisco in the 70s. So,
Well, you have a Walmart, a Sam's Club, and a Costco all lined up there around the Eubank and Central area. And I did see lines. I did not, I was driving at the time, trying to be safe about that, and wasn't able to rubberneck too much. But yeah, the restriction is 25% of maximum occupancy or 75 customers, whichever is smaller, which of course is a significant restriction. And I think it's worth noting that given that level and the way that this standard is being calculated, we're going to have grocery store lines and big box store lines at least through springtime coming about. These are very aggressive, very harsh guidelines. So either we have a vaccine and kind of this whole situation starts to wane pretty dramatically, or we're just going to be moving forward through very strict standards here, red, yellow, and hopefully green in the not too distant future. But even green, and I've heard that we're not expected, counties aren't expected to get to green in a very, very long time. We're talking about late next spring. Uh,
yeah, 3, 4, 5 months are the
yeah.
estimates that not from the state of New Mexico, but from statisticians and private
Mm-hmm.
epidemiologists who've taken a look at this. And the other thing is we are in the transition phase of COVID in many senses. Policies changing, the infection rate, the hospitalizations changing. I'm going to be very interested and very, I don't know, hopeful. That's the word. That if can New Mexico and can the United States do the logistics to get this vaccine out there? And how long will that take it? And what are we going to have to do? One of the main vaccines, one of the concerns about it is that it requires basically just above absolute zero storage temperature,
Mm-hmm.
extremely low temperature. And only you have 3 days once you take it down, not the sort of temperature that you even have in a freezer or a industrial type freezer. So we have some logistical problems. But man, if the vaccine's there and it works, now let's get it out there
Right.
and not have that turn into a bureaucratic and a logistical nightmare, further damaging the state of New Mexico.
Well, countries are beginning to approve it, and kind of an aside here is that while the FDA and President Trump has done a fantastic job of pushing very hard to clear out obstacles that would otherwise be in the way of vaccine development. The average vaccine, I think, takes 7 years. The fact that they've ramped this up so quickly is a testament to the Trump administration's handling of this situation, the COVID issue. But we'll see how things shake out with the vaccine. What I'm more looking at here is red, yellow, and green, and some of the highlights or lowlights. First and foremost, it is county by county. That is welcome, but the very strict levels here within you're not getting much in the way of freedom, even at the green level. For example, uh, even in green, mass gatherings are limited to 20 people or 100 vehicles. That'd be a fun gathering, 100 vehicles. Close contact recreational facilities remain closed. Now, what exactly that means is open to question, but the graphic they have is for a popcorn bucket and soda. And that certainly puts movie theaters into,
Yeah.
but I'm sure there are other close contact recreational facilities. And I would hazard to bet that there are, many of those, like laser tag at Hinkle Family Fun Center and other indoor activities, arcades. Uh, you know, it strikes me, and that doesn't say close contact indoor recreational facilities. It just says, that they all, any close contact facilities. Now, outdoor recreational, what is Cliffs Amusement Park? Do you think it's a close contact recreational facility or an outdoor recreational facility? Because the graphic
Yeah.
there is a golf hole and a flag.
Well, I think maybe Hinkle, and it's been a while since I've been there, but I don't think it's changed too much. I think it's both because it kind of has the indoor arcade and then the outdoor putt putt and, cars and other things. So maybe it's both. So,
And I'm not expecting you
yeah,
to
no, I'm not
solve this,
saying
but
no. I appreciate the question, but these are interesting. These are interesting questions. And the other issue that I've seen expressed is that because it's like you're in red or green, it's like right now. So what happens is you could be able to quote open up under, going from red to yellow, and then 2 weeks hence be back in the yellow and have to close down. So,
right.
and in some businesses, that's maybe not as big of a challenge as in others. But, certainly in industries like the restaurant industry, you just don't bring back, 20 waitresses and 4
Right.
cooks and buy all the food and then not know whether you'll be able to operate for more than a week or two. And I know that's been one of the huge frustrations of business in California is that they have had these county level approach, and it creates this just whipsaw effect where you're open, you're closed, you're open, you're closed. Uh, I'm not cheering for things to be closed, but the bottom line is that opening up, if you're just open for 2 weeks, that could do more harm than good to a business. So
Yeah, under red, no indoor dining at all. Outdoor dining is allowed at 25% of maximum capacity, whatever the heck that means, because
yeah,
that maximum capacity number typically has to deal with fire code. Well, unless the fire department is coming around and checking your tents or
I
whatever.
hear they are. By the way,
Oh, joy.
yeah. So
That's so
at
exciting.
least in Bernalillo County, Albuquerque, I hear that that they're going around and saying, yeah, this space could hold so many. So I guess it would be 25% of that.
Fantastic.
So
That's
yeah,
so exciting to hear that. I'm totally being sarcastic, by the way. Establishments serving alcohol under red must close by 9 p.m. So when you get to the yellow, you do get to a 25% of maximum indoor capacity. But again, we're talking likely months away. Alcohol at 10 p.m. is under yellow, and the restrictions get somewhat looser at green. Now, I will let you know, Wally, and folks out there. Uh, I am going to attempt to take advantage of the outdoor dining at 25% capacity today. I am a diehard Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and I also do not have the Sunday ticket subscription to uh, watch every single game. So there is a establishment. I'll just say Paradise Hills Golf Course. They have
yes.
an outdoor patio there. They're showing the TVs from inside the restaurant, turning them in a direction that will theoretically work for outdoor viewing of this game, which has been rescheduled due to issues with the NFL and coronavirus. And so I'm going to be checking out the rare 25% outdoor dining restrictions, see how that all shakes out. But
And
the
what time is that, Paul?
the game is today at 3 p.m.
Okay, so
New
3
Mexico
p.m.
time.
So it's pretty nice day shaping up to be
Very lucky, yes.
mid 50s, not bad. I was thinking if it was this evening, like a 9 o'clock start, you'd be on the cusp between the 40s and the 30s. So yeah,
No.
it might work out for
So
you.
yeah, about as good as you could expect for Albuquerque weather-wise in mid-December here. So anyway, with all of that being said, these are very stringent. They're it's almost like they tailored them in name only to kind of finally cave, if you will, to allowing more local control and different treatment, but without really doing any of that until the virus is practically eradicated to begin with. So, uh, still intensely frustrated with the governor and her actions here. Now, I do have a bit of good news. There was a ordinance to be discussed, not mandatory paid sick leave, although that is coming up today at Albuquerque City Council meeting. However, this particular ordinance was pulled recently, just today, in the last few hours. It was introduced by Cynthia Borrego, who's at least not of the coalition of the insane, but Isaac Benton, who is definitely, he's the president of that coalition at City Council, which would impose $500 fines and 90 days in jail for essentially disobeying the public health order. That has been pulled from today's City Council meeting. So hopefully that one never sees the light of day. But boy,
So are we saying that fines and jail time could be a deterrent to crime? Is that the idea behind here? Maybe we should apply that to auto theft,
right.
burglary, armed robbery, things like that as well here in the greater Albuquerque area.
Well, and that's the question is if you're if what you're doing is illegal in any way, shape, or form, or harming other people. There are certainly aspects of this health order, both at the state and city levels, that uh, are hard to say make any sense whatsoever. So we shall see where city council goes. We have a full discussion today about mandatory paid sick leave, and if you haven't already reached out to your city councilors on that, please do so. But all that is a way to approach yet another issue. Wally, I and my family, we broke quarantine yet again. We are so naughty, and we headed to Scottsdale, Arizona recently. I'm not going to say when. However, I have been tested for COVID-19 since I returned. Not that I felt the need to get tested for this, but there was other purposes that caused me to get my now second test for the virus. I was tested, maybe in May or early June. And
Was this a standardized test? We're against those in some part of
it
New
was
Mexico as well.
standardized. You shove a
Yes.
stick up your nose and figure out what happens with that. But the thing about my travels, it was for a child's birthday. We can't have a normal birthday for a young child. We went to a place called the Great Wolf Lodge there in Scottsdale, which is essentially an indoor water park and recreational facility. Now, Arizona is not doing great when it comes to stopping the spread of the virus, but that could be for a whole variety of reasons. All I can say is that this was an indoor water park with water slides and an area. If you've ever been to Cliffs and seen their water park, there's a giant dumping bucket. There's little water slides. There's areas for kids running around. They have literally a carbon copy of that at this
Mhm.
facility. It was open. Children were running around having a fabulous time. Water slides open. No masks in the water. You really couldn't wear them in line for the slides, even if you wanted to, because these are masks and you're going to get dunked in the water.
Right.
So that was not available. There's a wave pool. That's just that facility. By the way, the kids had a marvelous time. Adults were happy as well. But I was at one point standing within eye shot of a bowling alley, an arcade, a climbing wall, not to mention the water park, uh, and other dining options. And yeah, people were wearing masks in the lobby and doing the best social distancing they could. But uh, everybody came back, and the guessing clan healthy as ever, and no signs of COVID-19. I'm not sure if chlorine at high doses in the water will kill the COVID. I don't know. That would be a useful experiment
Yeah,
before we,
you would think that chlorine at some level would
yeah,
kill viruses. I
before
don't
we
think
go
that's too big of a stretch.
before we go around, destroying Cliff's amusement park or other outdoor recreational opportunities. It might make sense if somebody has some evidence on that. But anyway, the fact is that Scottsdale was a breath of freedom, and all of the guessings came back unscathed by the COVID-19. So,
And I have a similar experience
oh yeah,
recently. Have been to Arizona within the past 6 weeks on business. Got a COVID test when I got back, unrelated to that trip. It was just having to do with I needed one for something else, negative as well. And it's like a different place. The
mhm.
atmosphere of just being in the state is way different than New Mexico. One of the things I notice is on the freeway, instead of COVID is everywhere, they say if you get into an auto accident, pull your car over so you don't get rear-ended on I-40. That's one of the things that I saw, and
Yeah, Wally, I'll give you the
yeah,
time to collect your
no, no,
thought.
no problem.
Those signs, and I remember when they went
Yeah,
up because in big cities, and I lived before I came to New Mexico in the D.C. area where there's always serious traffic jams and
yeah,
issues. You want to know where to go if there's something going on the freeway. I never thought I would take issue with those signs, but it's just an indicator that anything government does can be abused because
yeah,
those signs are created with the best of intentions, but not to badger people for disobeying what we've seen is arbitrary and ineffective orders. And the same is true, of course, for the cell phone alert system, a system that's designed to hopefully, find children who are missing or kidnapped or elderly who may not be oriented anymore due to a variety of issues. Instead, we get these alerts from the governor saying, be scared, hunker down, all these kinds of things. It just indicates that anything you give government can and will be abused.
yeah. No doubt about it. And along those lines, to just follow on with what Arizona's doing, I'm seeing more and more things about studies that when you have nonsensical, unexplained rules, it tends to decrease compliance with things that supposedly would be more important. And one of the ones is the CDC now recommends masks for outdoor activities where there are other people nearby. Well, in New Mexico and in Albuquerque, you're supposed to wear a mask 24/7 if you're outside. I've been places and frequently go places where you're out in the forest, you're out in the wilderness. You might see one or two people every hour or two, in which case maybe you could put your mask on as you pass them. But the idea that, yeah, we're making a lot of lawbreakers on things that haven't very well been explained. The reason and why the impact is just do it, just do it, just do it. Well, we've been doing it here in New Mexico, and it hasn't been real successful to this point.
Yeah, if you may be referring to an article in the Los Angeles Times, many aren't buying public officials' stay at home message. And they make an analogy, which I'm sure you'll appreciate. Some say, as with sex education, and I would also offer drugs as one of these, the abstinence only mechanism isn't effective, or the abstinence only message isn't effective. And it's tremendously ironic, and this is genuine irony, where the left will say, well, we need sex education, we need to talk about
Right.
condoms and preventative measures, as well as harm reduction in the area of drugs, which libertarians comfortably accept all of these, as well as the idea that just say no isn't enough when it comes to COVID-19. Of course, the left has adopted the not just say no, but very puritanical approach to the virus, and that has been problematic and not necessarily embraced by large numbers of people. And I would only say that while I'm not saying that he endorses that particular message Ryan Laughlin at KOB TV tweeted that story out, just saying, look, this is a real story, an informative story. Uh, we were talking earlier today, and he pointed that story out as something that he had retweeted for interest of his followers, and it's a very interesting read indeed. So, just say no, Wally Drangmeister.
Yes, just say no. There's a open space behind where I live, and most, there's usually two people on the 100 or so acres that are back there. But either someone officially or someone who had a color printer and a laminator laminated that you're supposed to wear your mask at all times, because evidently they saw somebody back there that wasn't
Oh,
wearing their mask at all
how
times. So
helpful.
yeah, very helpful. So
Uh, so finally, after more than a half hour, leaving the coronavirus at least somewhat behind, uh, Rio Grande Foundation was in National Review's Capital Matters publication this week, talking about Joe Biden and his plans for our federal lands. I mentioned earlier, Michelle Lujan Grisham turned down Department of Interior. Uh, Essentially, the article, and I won't go into all the details, but we really looked at the manifest problems that a Biden administration, if he goes through with his ban on fracking on federal lands, could, what that could do to New Mexico. And it's amazing because I don't think either you or I, Wally, would have applauded uh, President Obama for his reasonableness on fossil fuels and kind of, uh, he did, and we have talked about it, do some good things. Obama did, which number one would be crude oil exports and signing legislation to allow that, which is a standalone bill originally that Michelle Lujan Grisham, as a congresswoman, did support. But if Biden actually starts to work on these energy issues, uh, he will be far to the left of Obama, and he will be as I describe it, a dagger at the heart of New Mexico's economy. And I kind of express my wonderment and frustration that the voters of New Mexico seem to embrace this far left approach that would be so economically harmful to us. But check it out. It's worth a read. It's available at heirsofenchantment.com. And it's always good to try to draw attention nationally to what is happening here in New Mexico. And I hope to continue to do that on the pages of National Review.
yeah, and then the just to follow on a little bit, New Mexico has extremely high level of our oil and gas production is on public land, the highest, I believe, of any state if things haven't changed
Right.
dramatically. And so, yeah, the impact to Mexico, as you point out in your article, which I did read, by the way,
Oh, excellent.
is going to be immense if that is the case. And then one of the kind of straw men that the left has said from time to time is, "Oh, we're not against oil and gas; we're just against fracking." Well, no fracking, no oil
Mm-hmm.
anymore, no gas anymore. And also, so if you're going to do that, it makes it so much harder to develop if huge swaths of land aren't available for development, because, all those development areas, whether they're federal land, state land, or private land, are kind of uh, they get developed kind of together so that the infrastructure
Mm-hmm.
is efficient and effective. So yeah, this could be way worse than even just the reduction in oil and gas production from federal land itself. It could go well beyond that.
Yeah, and of course, as you point out, it's not just about fracking. The left wing environmental groups generally oppose oil and gas and other mining or whatever kind of traditional fuel and energy development wherever it's done. If you don't like fracking, well, there's a full Gulf of Mexico with a lot of oil in it,
Yeah.
and getting down to the bottom of that, and it costs a lot of money, and it's one of the reasons that you haven't seen as much activity in the Gulf recently. you know, but they continue to want to push for more and more drilling to be off limits, areas to be drilled to be off limits in the Gulf of Mexico, because, you know, and there have been, at least recently, one prominent accident, and you know, it's a much more challenging proposition to go down to the bottom of the ocean and bring,
Yeah, drill thousands and thousands of feet
yeah,
under the ocean compared to a place like Eddy or Lee County where it's pretty dry most of the time.
very dry. Yes. All right. Well, Wally, last subject to talk about, and we have addressed the challenges being faced by poor Hispanic, African American students. Uh, Now, McKinsey and Company, so this is the very well thought of and respected consulting firm nationally. They published some details showing how limited the minority groups and low income, and two different groups there, of course, the access and the ability to engage in remote instruction have really been. And this is something that, you know, again, partisan divide here, a bizarre partisan divide because, you know, conservatives, libertarians have traditionally been very critical of public education and you know, the results of it, the ideology put forth in it, and yet they are the ones that are advocating for input person learning to be restored, whereas the teachers unions, the left, do I repeat myself, Democratic politicians, uh, they are advocating very much for a continuation of the current virtual learning situation. And yet these same advocates do not bat an eye, do not advocate publicly, do not discuss, and you could go down up and down a list of 2 dozen or more lefty groups in New Mexico, and you will not see or hear a peep out of them relating to you know, needing to get back into the classroom. And uh, basically, McKinsey, and there's a helpful chart also at Errors of Enchantment, the quality of remote instruction uh, from the United States, March through May 2020. So we're talking about the first go rounds. Uh, there is no average or above average at all in the low income quadrant. It's simply low quality or zero instruction. Nearly 50% of those uh, low income students are just not being instructed whatsoever. Black students suffering next most, with some of them, you know, maybe 10 to 15% in the average, above average grouping, and Hispanics, nearly a quarter of them are in the average and above average quadrant. But nonetheless, the only group above 25% is white students. They're maybe around 35 to 40% of getting above average and above average, but still large numbers of students at all income levels are essentially dropouts at this point in the education system.
Yeah, you know, a couple of ways to view the dropout situation is that they can't find thousands and thousands
Mm-hmm.
of students in New Mexico and other states as well. So that's one level. We don't even know where they are. Now, what about the ones that we do know where they are? We know a lot of them are not doing well. So we have lots and lots of challenges when it comes to what's going on there in public education. And the thing, and you know, I've talked about this before, look at the data. Once you fall so far behind, even in the early elementary grades, that may be it. Your academic
Mm-hmm.
career may be over, and you may not make it to be a high school graduate, much less uh, further education and training. And it just creates a vicious cycle of lack of academic and then economic achievement. It's a very sad thing. And boy, man, I hope we can get our kids back in school. You know, even the CDC is starting to say, oh, and the great Dr. Fauci, who's like the great and powerful Oz, is saying, well, maybe, oh, kids aren't causing this. Maybe we can get them back in school.
Exactly. Well, we are going to leave it there this week, aside from saying that the podcast interview this week involves my wife and oldest daughter, who will discuss the homeschooling option and things to watch out for, whether students like it, or at least in this case, one student, and some differences and important issues to consider if you are looking at homeschooling your children. So with that, thanks for listening to this week's show. Make sure to get the latest edition of Tipping Point New Mexico by subscribing at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. You can post or comment on this and other episodes on Facebook and Twitter, and tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.